We are at the fire camp here in Bly. You can see a little bit of that behind me here, those tents that are set up. There are bathrooms, there's US Foods here as well. Obviously, there are a lot of firefighters here who have been calling this area home, but we were able to go to the fire line for the past roughly 4 hours or so. It takes an extended period of time to get through that fire line. You're mostly traveling on gravel Forest Service roads, so it is not an easy trek, but we were mostly on the southern end of the fire, and the good news is that we didn't see any flames when we were driving through that fire. Yes, a lot of burned forest, but no active fires that we saw. For a large portion of the southern end of this fire, it seems they are finally entering that mop-up stage after three weeks of work. So we were able to talk with the firefighter who actually calls Klamath Falls home. So this is his area. He knows this terrain well, and it just was such a relief for him to finally be able to get some closure. It was his 14th day today, and he's leaving feeling really good, knowing that his team did incredible work over the past 2 weeks. So they are feeling good on the southern end of the fire. I will tell you though, I think there are still some concerns on the northern end of the fire. Parts of that didn't get as much rain overnight, and additionally the northern end has just been challenging this entire time. Deb?
Genevieve, you mentioned how big this fire is. The perimeter is so large, and different areas are under different stages of containment. You talked a little bit about different areas, but what more do you know about other problem areas?
Well, I think what's really interesting is that when we were driving through the fire, and if you're able to go onto my Twitter, I did post a video of it, you will see that there are areas where it is all completely burned, the ground is ash, and then there are areas where it is still green. And that is due because the fire burned kind of sporadically through this area. There were several spot fires, but a big part of that is the terrain and the wind. So it was just a matter of where the wind was blowing and then where the fire was going to race during that day and in those certain conditions. So, we say more than 400,000 acres. That's how big this fire is. When you are driving through the forest, you will notice that not all 400,000 acres are burned. Of course, there are still some areas that are green and that will last through this fire.
Genevieve, have you talked with any firefighters or homeowners in the area?
Yeah, I've actually talked with both. I've been in conversation with a homeowner who lives in between Bly, where we are, and Chiloquin, and he lost his home as well as several other buildings. I believe he lost some ATVs and a plane. He repairs those kinds of things for work, and so he had extensive damage. He's been back home and has seen that it is pretty much all burned to the ground, but he is back and working on that rebuilding phase. I've also talked with two firefighters. One firefighter that I just got done talking with, like I said, he's from Klamath Falls, and so for him, this is home. We have fire crews from all over the nation here. This truck behind me is actually from Wyoming, and as we were driving into the fire, we saw crews from New Mexico. So for him, it definitely had an emotional aspect fighting this fire in his hometown.
Steve, one of the concerns would be a fire in Forest Park, which is off in the distance over there. But Portland Fire and Rescue shared the data with me. 4 homeless campfires reported at parks. In 2017, there were 17 of them. During the last fiscal year, 150.
This passes 4-0. We will go to the motion.
City Council adopted new protocols for how they'll handle homeless camps in forested areas. The city fire marshal said unauthorized camping in wildfire hazard zones poses an unacceptably high threat of fire.
If Forest Park were to catch on fire, it would be one of the biggest disasters in Portland history.
This is a map of high wildfire risk areas. You'll see it includes Forest Park, Oaks Bottom, Powell Butte. The city, with new protocols, will work with community groups to educate campers of the fire danger in these areas, hoping they will relocate voluntarily. If they refuse, the city will move them.
We want to make sure that those folks that are living in those areas understand what the dangers that are posed, and then also take care of them and put them in a safer place before those fires happen.
Commissioner Joanne Hardesty said during the council session that she doesn't like sweeps.
But as the commissioner in charge of the Fire Bureau, I cannot stand by and do nothing as people are at risk of dying from fire.
Now, I also checked with the ACLU of Oregon on this. Their executive director sent me an email after reviewing some of these protocols that we're talking about, saying that she appreciated how they're limited to just that wildfire season in areas that are high risk, and also that it includes outreach to community groups. Now, Hardesty also said that through the winter, she hopes the city council can develop some strong city code to codify this next year.
And then we also talked to people in the city today as well for much of the summer and late spring. We heard a lot of good news about the pandemic. pandemic. But recently, we've heard a lot of concerning headlines. First of all, there's been that Delta variant we've heard so much about. It is proving worrisome to a lot of officials, a lot of health officials. Case numbers, they are also spiking both locally and nationally. And of course, just today and yesterday, we've heard a lot about masks returning. It really is enough to give anyone psychological whiplash. Think back to when the pandemic started.
We get ourselves mentally prepared to be in the pandemic and to be embracing masks and all of the social distancing.
After that journey, relief this past spring and early summer.
Wow, I can go out and I'm vaccinated. I can do all kinds of different things.
Now, new mask recommendations coupled with rising case numbers. Steps seemingly going backward.
That type of yes, no is emotionally exhausting, even for the most mentally resilient of us.
People are certainly tired.
And I don't want to think about it. I just want to know what I need to do to be safe, and I'll do it.
It's really upsetting. I think we got to get this thing under control.
Dr. Robin Henderson, a psychologist with Providence, says this back and forth certainly feeds skepticism on all sides when it comes to public health and the pandemic. Is there a right way for policymakers to go about this so we combat that skepticism a little bit?
You know, Lincoln, I think the best way right now is the transparent truth and letting the science speak and listening not to the politicians and the policymakers, but to the physicians, the infectious disease specialists, the scientists, all of who really understand and know about disease transmission.
Now, Dr. Henderson says taking steps backward might actually have another psychological effect, convincing some who haven't been vaccinated yet to actually go out and get that vaccine.